Hi, my name's Jason Barcomb. I work in dispatch as a clerk with CV and Michelle, Lori, and Dalton. I had moved to Utah in my 20s to become a ski bum, and I was living with a guy that had been down there before for work and told us all stories. And it was a very intriguing idea to go down and work in Antarctica, and I knew somebody that had done it, so I kind of had a foot in the door. And yeah, I tried several times to get a job, and eventually he was the one that kind of put my resume on the right desk, and didn't take very long after that. I was down there in November of 2008 was the first time I deployed. I personally have always been a wanderer year after year, 12 months out of the year. You know, I just have always gravitated towards seasonal work. So the Antarctic program, since it's basically a seasonal contract job, just seemed to fit right into what I had already been doing. So I definitely wanted to travel more before I got into the program. And that's sort of, I guess, one of the reasons why I stayed a part of the program is the travel opportunities to head down to the Pacific South. I overpacked a little bit, but you know, you basically you got to bring some work gear and some gear to kind of mill around station in. The program will issue you all of your extreme weather work gear once you get down to New Zealand. There's some pretty good resources. The U.S. Antarctic program tries to prepare everybody as best they can, but it is still just kind of you got to have some faith and just do it. Just get down there. If you forget something, we have plenty of resources down there, you know, people that leave things behind, like a general store, Salvation Army, Goodwill. If you're missing something, chances are you can find it. Somebody's left it behind before. So yeah, it's rare that you get down there and you're just, you know, you've completely forgotten something or don't have what you need. Somebody will hook you up with some form of it. Some people go down with nothing. After they've been a few times, like, I can just get everything there. I don't even need to pack a bag. I worked at McMurdo Station. The United States has 3 stations on the continent. McMurdo is on the New Zealand side of the continent. The South Pole is obviously at right in the middle. And then Palmer Station is on the Antarctic Peninsula closest to South America. And that's only accessible by boat. You would deploy to McMurdo through Christchurch, New Zealand, and then continue on to the South Pole from McMurdo. To keep the South Pole station running, it's mostly powered by diesel fuel with some solar supplementation. These days we drag most of the fuel there in tractor convoy. I also got lucky. I deployed at a warm part of the season. So November, when I went in, the sun was already out 24 hours a day. The average temperature was above 0. And it only got warmer. And you know, by Christmas, the temperature is right between 20 and 30 degrees every day. The sun just circles the sky all day. It's sunny all the time. So I didn't have to deal with a real cold shock my first time. You know, the second time I went down the next year, I deployed in August, which is still technically winter, and that was a completely different story. That was, I was a little cocky because I had gone the year before and it was nice and warm and I don't know what the big deal is about. Well, the second time I went, it was probably 25 below 0 when I got off the plane, and it was, yeah, that was different. So everything's sort of like a college dorm, military barracks combination. During the summer in McMurdo, there can be as many as 1,000 people at the station, and everybody shares a room. You know, you have at least one roommate. If you go down there with a partner, then you can share the room with your partner. And if you're very new to the program, you might get put into a 4-person room. You know, the rookies have to kind of deal with that. That can be challenging to have 4, especially if you know you're a 50-year-old adult that's never gone to college, and now all of a sudden you find yourself in a room with 3 other strangers, that it can be a challenge. But generally speaking, you're in a room with another person. You do have some choices. If you don't get along, or if you're completely on opposing schedules, you may be able to adjust your living life a little bit. But we have some common areas, so every building would have tons of dorm rooms, 2 people per room. 2 rooms would share a bathroom. There are lounges filled with books and VHS movies and DVDs from the 80s and 90s. So the Antarctic program is, think of it as 2 groups. You're either a scientist down there conducting some form of research, or doing some kind of scientific activity, and then you have support workers who run the station, who run the 3 U.S. stations in Antarctica. So I was a support worker. So it's like working for the county. You show up every day, and we've got roads to maintain and buildings to maintain. Anything to do with heavy equipment. We also have 2 or 3 different airfields that involve aircraft it's just perpetual maintenance. So there's a lot of boring every day, the same thing every day, kind of like plowing snow. You plow the same road 1,000 times. But there's also some interesting work. There are other opportunities. Sometimes you get a chance to leave the station or stations and work out in the deep field for a time. And it's crazy how much the cold will sap out of you. The pace is a lot slower just because it's so cold out. I mean, everything just takes forever, and nobody's in a rush. We're there to support a little community, and you don't want to get hurt. We can't break equipment because there's no auto parts store, and we can't just fix things. My job was more where you show up at 7 and then you quit at 5:30, and you get a nice break in the middle of the day. We wouldn't take any breaks except at lunch, and it would be a nice hour and a half if you wanted it. So we averaged 54 hours a week. Obviously, if the weather was terrible, we would work a little bit more. Occasionally, we'd be able to take a little extra time off. But after 4 to 6 months of working 54 hours a week down there, you're ready to bail out, ready to call it. If you're self-motivated and you have a hobby, for example, if you are an endurance runner, or if you like to play music, it's a really great place because you can have a lot of alone time. When you're not working and you're disciplined, you can have a lot of practice time. You can have a lot of time to train. We have some pretty good athletic resources. We have a couple big gyms, and there are a lot of artists that go down there, and it's they might wash dishes for a job, but then in their off time they're painting or doing any kind of art you might imagine. So yeah, there's always something going on. Socializing is a big thing. It's kind of crazy to think, but it actually ends up being a lot of fun. That's several of my friends throughout the years. They would travel for 6 months and then work in McMurdo for 6 months. And every year they would do something different, So, people that have been to 100 countries are pretty common down there, and people that don't have homes anywhere, oh, what's your address? Well, where's my shipping container? Like, where's my truck being parked right now? That's my address. I say the scariest times have always been sort of weather related, because it's such an isolated part of the world, and getting there and around depends so heavily on aircraft. It really, 9 out of 10 days, everything is just sunshine and rainbows. But that one day where things go a little bit bad, they tend to go like a lot bad, or you can see how they could go a lot bad. If you're working out away from the station and your tractor breaks down, and you're taught how to prepare for an emergency where you might have to spend some time in the tractor where people can't get to to help you, or you may have to pitch a tent and sleep in a tent if a storm rolled in and it was too dangerous to have anybody go out and find you. And you're taught the worst case scenario, but then you might have a day where it kind of like gets close to that, and then you really start to think like, wow, like you're out in the middle of nowhere, 20 miles from the station, 1,200 miles from New Zealand, or 2,200 miles from New Zealand. All of a sudden you feel really tiny, and you realize like your life is sort of in your own hands all the time. Every little decision you make affects your ability to survive something small. Moving too fast around the equipment heats up when you're running it, but then it cools off right away when you stop. You get out of the equipment, you slip on some tracks because you're moving too fast, you're not taking your time, and if you whack your head and you're 5 miles from your buddy who's working on another part of the road, little things like that are kind of like life lessons to slow down and sort of be in tune with where you're at, and don't push your luck, kind of be realistic, prepare, be on the safe side all the time. I mean, those are like the lessons that I've learned. Any chance I get, if I can convey any bit of wisdom that I've learned, even before I got into dispatch, or, it's to slow down and work efficiently, instead of sort of rushing around to cover up for dilly-dally, being inefficient with your time and then rushing around to sort of compensate. It's better to be slow, disciplined, and if I can convey that to anybody, you get a lot more done if you just kind of slow down and take your time. I don't get the opportunity enough probably, or I don't make the opportunity to pass down my wisdom if anybody would listen. But yeah, any chance I could get, because that's definitely one of the greatest lessons I've learned while working down there. We did have an aircraft incident that was pretty traumatic, where a plane was unable to land due to visibility. The fog bank rolled in and the plane didn't have the ability to go back to New Zealand, so it was forced to attempt a landing at McMurdo Station, and the fog bank was so bad that you couldn't see 100 feet, and the pilot circled until he ran out of fuel and landed blind. And the fact that he was a great pilot and made great decisions, there was a problem. They put it on the ground, but it was very, very very stressful time to be there. If you get hurt, there's medical facilities down there are almost non-existent. If you get hurt, it basically means you're going to get flown to New Zealand, and you might not get a plane for a while. We are just about to start a big station renovation that the government had been working for a decade. We were just about to start that when the pandemic hit, and the program was forced to go into a bare minimum maintenance mode, whereas the only people that were sent down there were people that were there only to keep the lights on at the station and just keep the station running. A normal 1,000 people was trimmed down to 300 people this last year. Everything got put on hold temporarily, and will be for the next year as well, until I think the pandemic is squashed, at least better than it is right now. So just to keep Antarctica and that station free of the virus. Antarctica is not owned by any nation. There's a treaty that governs what different nations can do on the continent. So this treaty that is signed by, I believe, 130 countries around the world says that you can't be down there for any profitable purpose, no mining, no fishing, everything you do on the continent has to be with respect for protecting and leaving no trace, and basically, looking after it as a natural resource that can be studied or used as a place to understand what's happening around the planet. But you can't build a colony there. You can't have residents. You can't have any military presence. You have to basically work together. It's it's an interesting model that unites a lot of the country that otherwise seems to be at odds with each other. But down in Antarctica, we are working together. Being a part of the program and being a part of the science that's happening down there, the attempt to understand the whole universe. I mean, every type of science is happening there. Glaciology, astronomy, air science, oceanography. I mean, you name it, there's always something being down there. So just to be a part of that, be there firsthand, to be there to support it, to actually, I'm building the road that these scientists are going to use to go out and study these penguins or study these fossils buried in the glacier. That's been a very rewarding part of my life, to just be a part of that. Watch National Geographic, like, hey, I was there. I know those guys, like, they're really cool people. They're just like us, but they're, they figured out 20 new dinosaur species that they never knew existed in Antarctica. And that might be the biggest effect to me is my development as a person. When you're in a small community of 1,000 or 150 people, which would be the winter population, I've spent 4 winters down there as well, and because the station becomes isolated to air travel, this population goes down to 150. So to basically live in a little village with 150 people and get to know what it takes to be with humans, what's important, being happy and having peace of mind, and are all the rat race things that we sort of do back at home, are they really what makes us happy and what makes life good? Or is it being around 50 of your closest friends and playing music all the time and, living simple, because we don't have anything down there. There is nothing. You sort of have to make up your own toys and your own parties, and you don't really need very much. I guess you kind of learn that you just don't need a lot to be happy, but you do need each other. And it's worth the effort to come together and look past things that might separate us and just look out for each other. I mean, that's the most important thing. I'm not sure what my future is. It's definitely, I consider it a big part of my life and my family to some extent. So the idea of not going back ever is, I don't see that. To go down and potentially take a management role in my department would be a goal of mine, or to go down and be a part of some kind of deep field work where you're out in the middle of the continent working away from the stations on specific science projects. Those are some things that still interest me. So it's just whether or not the opportunity comes up.